Um, we are having a bit of a confused weather. I suppose it's got a lot to do with global warming. We are supposed to be in the height of our summer, enjoying heat every day, but it's cold. We are having very cold rains, some very strong cold winds as well. It actually feels like an autumn more than a summer. But nonetheless, we want to preach in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Yesterday, I went to the pharmacy to pick up some medication. So while I was sitting there waiting for uh, uh, one of the uh, uh, tellers or counter guys to assist me, there was a traditional healer who walked up to me, you know, uh, proper African traditional healer. He had all of his animal skins, he had all of his beadings, his attires and everything. And he asked me, um, do I know where they do the vaccinations for children, not for COVID-19, your children immunization protocols. So he asked me if I know where they do them in that pharmacy. So I showed him where the door to the clinic, the pharmacy clinic is, and then he thanked me and then he went off. I sat there thinking about that particular moment because traditionally speaking, African traditional healers are very heavily opposed to Western medicine and to Western treatments, primarily because Western treatments um, fail to um, combine the two worlds, the physical and the spiritual, and to see the relationship between the sicknesses in the body and the spiritual well-being of the individual. Um, but I looked at this gentleman who had brought his child to be immunized, even though he is a traditional healer. And of course, um, if you've had some experience or have seen them in our context in Africa or elsewhere, just by looking at that guy, you would have known that this is one guy who has been in his craft for decades and is well cemented in it. But as I looked at him, my mind began to realize that a number of people would have different views towards him. There are those who would laugh and say, if what he believes in works, why is he here, for immunization? And I thought to myself, that would be equivalent to me because I am a pastor and I'm picking up medication. One might argue, if what I believe in works, why am I here? And then I also thought of many other things, as my mind was wandering. But here's the point that makes me share this story with you. I then thought, and I was actually touched because I then thought to myself, but there is another side to the story that one may not see at face value. And that's the fact that in as much as he believes in what he believes, he also believes that God gave knowledge and wisdom to many systems and cultures in the universe. And he believes that what God has not revealed to him in his space or in his religion, God may have revealed to others elsewhere, and that there's nothing wrong with him asking for help where God may have revealed information in a different way. And I started to think about that for a moment. Now my mind was wandering off. I was thinking of our faith, our Christianity, and I was thinking of many things that we are often unable to answer from the Bible. That, for example, scientists will try and answer for us, okay? Case in point, this vaccination issue. There's been quite a lot of issues around vaccination, theories around vaccination. And I noticed that when the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church turned to Adventist scientists for guidance on vaccination, and internationally reputable Adventist scientists then advised the General Conference that, look, we know what mRNA is, we know how these vaccines are being developed, and we can tell you that this works. We are a people of faith, but we are also people of science, and we can tell you that these vaccines work. They may not be perfect. We may not have had time to study them for decades, but using the most advanced technologies available, they work, and they are going to be very key in stopping hospitalizations and death, though they may be limited in stopping transmissions. And I then watched what followed afterwards, that even though these fellow believers like us, who are also highly gifted scientists, had given their direction to the church, some went as far as saying we cannot trust these scientists, even if they are Adventist. And then I saw a slippery slope of divisions where now it appears no one can speak with authority as long as you don't want to believe them, kind of thing. So you are just going to cast doubt on everyone because they are not saying what you like, you know. And all this was triggered by that traditional healer who had come to immunize his child. And it just made me think how much in my personal journey and in your journey as well, how open are we to God providing answers to us from places which we may not traditionally think are places that we would necessarily want to get answers from. Because here you've got a traditional healer who was immunizing a child, you've got a pastor who was picking up medication, and I'm sure yourself as a Christian, you've picked up medication in a pharmacy as well. Not that you don't believe in the power of prayer or in the power of healing, but your reality will also be when you've prayed and God has not given a miracle, then you trust him to now heal you through other people whom he has called, doctors and nurses. I've raised this, for example, before, that I do not believe that pastors are the only ones who are called. I think all of us are called by God to serve him. In the different careers we are in, there's always an opportunity to make it more than just a career, but actually make it a calling by making sure that it goes beyond just putting bread on your table, but it also becomes a ministry. Your contribution towards making people see God through you and in your life, through your career. And that is how you really convert a career into a calling. And I thought about that. I thought about in our Christianity, when answers to some of our questions lie outside our faith, how do we deal with it? How do we handle it? And where do we draw the line where we can say, okay, I am willing to take answers. They may be coming outside of my faith, but I can take them, or this has gone too far. It might end up being me now entertaining anything that may be coming from out there, okay? Possibly there may be other traditional healers who, if they saw this gentleman there immunizing his child, they might have argued, you've betrayed your call, or you are weak, you should be able, using your own knowledge of natural medicines and herbs and trees and all that, to actually immunize your own children. But it really just raised this issue in my head. And of course, if it's not something that you struggle with, then by all means, pretend I said nothing. But it did raise a question to me in my head. When do we know to trust a process outside of our faith? When do we know and have confidence that God is at work, even though this thing is not within my parameters of faith or religion? I mean, he went out of his space because he believes that in one way or the other, the Western format of immunizations will work for his child. South Africa is a country that does not have laws that force immunization. It comes extremely highly recommended, but it is not mandated by law. There are many people of different kinds who hold different views about immunization, and they don't immunize their children. And if your child was to get a disease and in a hospital they were to discover that the child was not immunized, you would not be prosecuted. So we don't have a legal framework that forces immunization. So it was definitely a choice on his part. But I am marveling at the fact that it is a choice that is outside of what he traditionally knows and understands. And I can ask that question in many different formats for us as well. Can you, as an Adventist, allow yourself to be blessed by a message from a Catholic priest? Okay, are we able to hear God outside of our system? Are we willing for God to use solutions outside of our expectations, for example? So, like I'm asking, as an Adventist, are you able, would you be willing, do you allow for yourself to be blessed by God's work through individuals that are not within the Adventist church, for example? When you have questions that the Bible perhaps is not addressing in a detailed or step-by-step manner, do you allow yourself to trust science if science is providing answers to that? And of course, in all of this, the underlying question as well is, then where do you draw the line? Where do you balance out? Where do you make sure you don't get lost? How do you make sure you don't go too far? Perhaps in trusting. What are your signs and measurements of testing whether God is the one speaking through that thing, even though it is outside what you are used to? And how do you know when God is not the one speaking through it, and you prefer to then stay inside what you know or you may be familiar with? I just had these questions of faith when I saw this gentleman yesterday, and I wondered what happens with us when our faith has to go into a bit of a space of the unknown. How do we deal with it? You know, And like I said, maybe, sometimes when I think of these things, I say to myself, I'm probably mentally unwell. I might be bothered by things that really don't bother other people. But it did really make me think, how do we allow God to speak outside our traditional faith? Yet at the same time, how do we make sure we don't go outside of our faith and find ourselves testing things and spaces which may actually be opposed to the will of God for ourselves? But that's just a thought that I wanted to raise this evening, based on the experience I had yesterday. We are continuing with 2 Samuel chapter 13. We are going to do the second part that starts from verse 23 to verse 38, okay? So when we last saw it yesterday, Absalom has told his sister to keep her peace. Then when we start in verse 23, Absalom now puts an action plan. He is going to revenge his sister by killing his brother, Amnon, half-brother, Amnon. So what he did is he organized a feast for all of the king's children. Somewhere, we are not really told who owned this particular property, but it's possibly one of the king's properties, or one of the king's vineyards, or a places of that kind. So Absalom also asked King David that if all the princes could come, including Amnon. And initially, King David was reluctant for Amnon to go, okay? And I think to some extent, it is because David was suspicious after what Amnon had done. I do think that David was still trying to read the mood, between his sons, and the tensions that were probably there between the queens as well, the mothers to these children, who had now gone through this experience. But eventually David says Amnon can go. Absalom then instructed his servants that when Amnon was drunk with wine, they must kill him. And they did exactly that. They killed him. And the Bible then says, the other princes that were there then immediately ran, got on their horses, and scattered all over. Now, I've seen some versions of this story which suggest a slightly different event, that what Absalom did is he organized sporting with javelins, playing with javelins. So what he did, what is it called today? It's there in the Olympics, that sport where they throw the javelins to see how far it can go. I'm not sure of the technical name. But it's a sport that also was played quite a lot in the Middle East back in those days. And so some versions of the story suggest that that's what they were playing. And Absalom instructed his servants to throw their javelins when Amnon is in the field. And then it will look like an accident. Like Amnon was drunk and ran in front of the javelin spears, and that is how he died. But ultimately, Amnon is killed. Then a message arrives to King David, and the message says that Absalom has killed all the princes and none of them survived. Now, we see again this same Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, who then says, "My lord the king, please do not weep. Do not weep and do not tear your robes. It is not true that all the princes are dead. Only Amnon is dead because of the account of him forcing himself onto Tamar. That is why Absalom has instructed his servants to kill him." Okay. And indeed, not long after that, they saw from the horizon the dozens of galloping horses. It was the princes who had gone to attend Absalom's dinner or lunch or whatever it was. And David was so pleased to see that the rest of his sons indeed had not been killed. And from there onwards, he mourned Amnon, but Absalom ran away and he went to live. Let me just remember to get the name correctly, the name of this king. Yeah, he went to Geshur, where he stayed for a period of 3 years. That is where he was. Now, the Bible says in the ending of that story in chapter 13, or at least ending of this part of the story, that the king David, after he had grieved and mourned Amnon, he desired, but he never did it. He desired to go and see Absalom, okay, where Absalom was. Absalom was now living with the king Geshur, okay, in a territory called Talmai, okay. So it says, but Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Amihud, king of Geshur, okay? So there is a king called Talmai, and he is the king of a place called Geshur, probably one of those kings who was very close to King David, as we know, especially in the days when King David was running away from King Saul. He met many, many kings whom he, David, assisted, and they assisted him, and bonds, lifetime bonds were made between him and them, okay? Again, I've read some Jewish literature which suggests that this king of Geshur, Talmai, was the father to Absalom's mother, so that King David married a princess who was the daughter of this king, Talmai of Geshur. And so Absalom may have ran to his mother's family to stay there for a period of about 3 years, okay? But those are just points of historical interest, really. They are neither here nor there in terms of the lesson of the story. Today, there are just a few things that I want us to touch on, and then we finish up, okay? The first thing I want us to notice here is that because the issue of the rape of Tamar, which we spoke about yesterday, was not addressed adequately, efficiently, and in a manner that brought healing for everyone, what that did is it left Absalom brewing with anger and plotting revenge against his half-brother Amnon. And of course, Absalom succeeded in actually doing what he had sought out to do. And so the first challenge that I want us to understand and think about very, very importantly this evening is the role of unresolved issues in creating deep-seated enmities within our families. Okay? The reality of this story is that perhaps if King David had summoned the queens, the princesses, the princes, his brothers, and their children, and if he at that time had stood up for Tamar and had issued all the necessary punishments to Amnon and taken time as a father to heal a daughter that had been violated, I do not think that Absalom would have done what he did. In fact, we will come across it later. We are going there, where Absalom will tell General Joab that it is because of my father's failure to punish Amnon for what he did that I did what I had to do. And so this speaks to the danger of unresolved conflict within families. There are many families that assume, and that is exactly what is happening here. Many families assume that as time passes, people are healing or are forgetting. And that is not the case. As we see with Absalom, with the passing of time, he did not heal. He did not become better. But what happened is that time gave him an opportunity to plot. He was going to plot and execute his plan for revenge. Yes, perhaps there may be those members of our families who are able in silence and in time to heal on their own and find closure and forgive. And maybe you or I could be those family members who have that capacity to heal on our own, heal in our privacy, heal in the silence without talking to anyone. But the reality is that we are wrong to assume that everyone is like that. We are wrong to assume that silence is peace. Oh, please, you need to hear me very well on that one. Silence is not peace. The fact that there is silence in the family does not mean there is peace in the family. Equally, the fact that there is noise in the family does not mean there is chaos in the family. You know, dear friends, some of us, we heal better and we heal faster when things are spoken over and there's a discussion and there's an opportunity to scream and, and let out the anger that is within. So sometimes when we hear noise, we assume there's no peace, when in fact, that noise is a sign that there is peace because they are talking, they are getting it out, they are getting the anger out there, they are resolving the issue. So we tend to do the inverse of both. We assume when there is silence, there is peace. When there is noise, there is chaos. When in fact, there could be silence in chaos and there could be noise in peace. But it is important for us to absolutely understand that silence over issues is not being at peace. As I'm saying, I might be at peace. It might be a gift that God has given to me, an ability to heal on my own, an ability to heal without a discussion, an ability to overlook my pain without external closure. Yes, I do not deny that there are people who may be wired that way. But again, I'm saying the challenge would be to assume that then everyone is wired the same way. And so then what we usually do is we don't talk about issues, hoping, praying, and assuming that people are just going to get over it by themselves. You know, they'll just gravitate away from it. The reality is that many people are Absaloms. They are silent, but they are not okay. They are silent, but they have not left the past. They are silent, but they have not moved on. They are silent and they have not let go. And they are silent and they are planning and plotting. Unfortunately, what this story discusses is not something that is old and only happened in the olden days and ended there. The reality is that even today, there are many deaths that are happening within families. There is still killing, not figuratively, I mean literally. There are deaths that are happening in families even today, where family members are killing each other. And when you look at the root cause is that there are unresolved issues. A few years ago, I sat down with a gentleman, and as we were talking about the various challenges of life, he then shared with me, for example, challenges that were within his own family. And he tells me that there are three grandfathers at the foundation of their family. And the three brothers fought over something. To be quite honest, no one is fully clear about the details of what the three brothers were fighting for. But there are now three branches of the family that don't talk to each other. These are grandchildren now. And remember, when I spoke to this gentleman, he himself was not a child. He was in his 40s already then, and he had his own children. And he has many cousins with their own children. And they are aware of each other. They know that they are a blood family, but they are not talking to each other because of an unresolved issue between their grandfathers. Okay? And he tells me that, look, I and maybe two or three others within these three branches, we talk to each other because we do not understand what is at the heart of this issue. So we talk to each other, but even though we talk to each other, our relationship ourselves is sort of secret because everyone else is a sworn enemy and they should just not talk to each other in this whole situation. And I want us to understand this evening, saints, unresolved issues will eventually kill someone. The death may be physical, emotional, spiritual, but when issues are not resolved, someone always dies. It is a given. Someone always dies when families do not resolve issues. It's only a matter of who, when, and how, not if. Someone is definitely going to die. How they are going to die, it may be physical, like in this case. It may be emotional. It may be spiritual. A person may end up wanting nothing to do with the church or God or religion, only to find that these issues emanate from a family issue that was not handled properly. And so when we resolve issues, and you recall that we did speak of conflict resolution, probably a few weeks, if not maybe a month or two back, I can't remember. But we did look at conflict resolution. This is one of the reasons why conflict resolution is so important. It's to make sure that we prevent deaths of any kind within the family. It is about preventing those deaths from happening, the spiritual, the emotional, and the physical. Because unresolved issues will drive people to different lengths of searching for justice. And I want to encourage us this evening that in the family you are a part of, avoid by all means possible and available to you to allow issues to go unresolved. I would really challenge that one of our key contributions to our families, please try and get issues resolved as much and as soon as possible. Because I am saying it again, it's only a matter of time. Someone always dies. Someone always dies. Whether the unresolved issue is killing them emotionally, killing them spiritually, or killing them physically. And by the way, with the killing physically, it doesn't always mean that an Absalom will rise up and kill another family member. Some people have died physically from stress, heart attacks, strokes, stress. These are things that have happened to people physically over matters that were happening within the family. And I don't think I am speaking to people here who have no knowledge of the reality and the experience of life. People are having heart attacks every day because of family issues. People are going into hospitals because of stress, with weak immune systems, losing weight, memory loss, you name it, it is happening left, right, and center because of unresolved family issues. So here we are not just talking about the possibility of one person doing something, but the reality is that that too is happening. That too is happening, okay? We hear stories on a daily basis. A man took a gun, shot himself, shot the children, shot the wife, shot himself, and the whole family is gone, wiped out. And when these things are investigated, often the police will find that there is a family issue at the back of this challenge. So I would want us this evening to be very careful and stop downplaying the impact of unresolved problems in the families. Again, whether you want to come up with an excuse and say, oh, this thing happened a long time ago, we can't raise it now. My only challenge would be, those things will only make sense the day you come face to face with the damage of not resolving them. When we started today, Mom Louise asked that we pray over separating families. And she mentioned that, it used to be common that men are living their wives, they are leaving children behind. But we are also seeing now in our days, many mothers and wives also now doing it, leaving husbands, leaving children behind. I want to assure you that those decisions do not just fly into thin air. You see, when people are divorcing or when people are separating, I wish and pray we were mature to really deal with the issues. Because let me assure you, you may leave it hanging as you go your separate ways, but there will always be a child dying emotionally. There will always be a child dying spiritually as these separations and divorces are taking place. And people don't think about, yes, you and I are separating, yes, you and I are divorcing, but can we go and see a pastor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist to help us and our children navigate this situation? Unfortunately, in some cases, people have died physically as well. You know, there are innocent men and women out there who have been hijacked, shot, and killed by boys who joined crime because they were angry over their fathers who divorced their mothers. I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but those things happen. So you see, someone always dies from unresolved issues. It could even be someone who had no connection with this. A couple may divorce. All they are thinking about is themselves and their right to get out of this hot marriage. They don't think about helping the children to work out this divorce and for the children to be assisted to cry and to ask questions. You know, they all just move to their different parts of the world, you know, and if I never see you again, it will be too soon. But then there are children who grow up in the pain, in the misery, in the not understanding, in the emotional brokenness, in the spiritual distress. And some of them will turn to a life of crime, a life of drugs, and already they will be the first victims of this improperly unresolved issue. And before long, these children will be carrying guns, stealing cars, breaking into people's houses. And one day, this boy, this young man, will be shooting and killing someone, will be stabbing someone in their house. But when we try and trace, where did this come from? It's an unresolved family issue. So I wish you understood me very well this evening, that these are not small issues. When families do not resolve their problems, it becomes an open market of death and destruction for the future of those who will grow up under the shadow of the unresolved matter. And as I have already alluded in my example, a family unresolved matter may one day end up causing death and loss of life in a far, far away family that had nothing to do with what is happening in that particular situation. So let me assure you, and I hope we're still on the same page, that when you resolve issues in your family, when you resolve them adequately, when you resolve them well, you are not only saving your emotional and spiritual life and possibly your physical one as well, you are not only saving the emotional and spiritual life of other members of your family and possibly their physical one as well, but your maturity in resolving conflict can also save lives in other families, because people could die from what began as your private family affair. It could end up being something that has an impact for the community. You know, there are some values we have here in Africa that, of course, in the West, they are no longer as subscribed to as we still subscribe to them here. Here we believe strongly in this concept known as Ubuntu, which literally means humanity, to be humane. And we believe on this understanding that a human is a human through other human beings, and that you are part of a village. You are not just on your own. Our lifestyles here are not, in Africa, for example, are not as individualized as they may be in Europe and as they may be in the United States and the rest of the Western world. Now, yes, while indeed it is true, we have quite a number of our own problems to deal with here. But also, when you look at the rate at which young men pick up their guns in the United States and they enter malls and cinemas and schools and shoot all other children in there, it then tells you that we are missing the point. No, there is no such a thing as individualism. And time again, when psychiatrists and psychologists pour themselves into these young men who do these mass shootings, almost 8 out of 10, there rises family issues, which are now the reason why 10, 20 other families will be having funerals. And so the story of Absalom and Amnon teaches us never to underestimate silence for resolution. It cautions us to be very responsible and understand that if we don't take active measures of resolving conflict, the consequences of death, spiritually, emotionally, or otherwise, may be even bigger than what we may be anticipating, thinking it will only happen to our families, when in reality, it may end up impacting others out there as well. There are now fatherless children, motherless children out there who lost their parents in violent crimes,